The cold winds of Tarsus III howled through the valley as Lieutenant Marcus Vance stepped off the shuttle, the metal of his boots clinking softly against the landing platform. He scanned the alien sky, orange-hued, with 3 faint moons hovering like watchful eyes. This was not Earth. This was neutral ground, chosen carefully to host peace talks between the Earth Confederation and the mighty Zarinthian Empire, a race feared for their psionic abilities and rigid castes. Marcus had been handpicked for this. Machine young, disciplined, and known for his calm under pressure. But even he felt uneasy now. Rumors spread that someone wanted this summit to fail. As he walked into the crystalline hall where the talks were to be held, his eyes caught a figure unlike the armored diplomats and guards around her. She stood tall and graceful, her silver blue skin glowing under the light, her eyes like twin stars, sharp yet gentle. She wore a long robe woven from some organic material that shimmered as she moved. She was Princess Eloria, the daughter of the Zarinthian Empress, and a symbol of fragile hope. He had read her file, trained in diplomacy, gifted in telepathy, bound by honor. Their eyes met. She gave the slightest nod. That was their first silent exchange brief, but it stirred something unexpected in Marcus, something human. The opening ceremony began shortly after, with stiff speeches and cold handshakes. Marcus stood by his commander, but his attention flickered back to Ilaria more than once. She seemed distant, but there was a weight behind her posture, as if she carried the future on her shoulders. Minutes turned to hours, as political tension thickened the air. Then, just as the final speaker raised a toast, the floor shook. A deep rumble echoed across the hall. Lights flickered. Someone screamed. Explosion ripped through the east side, shattering the elegant crystal walls into deadly shards. Chaos followed. Instantly guards drew weapons, diplomats scattered, and smoke filled the chamber. Through the confusion, Marcus spotted Ilaria pinned beneath debris, blood streaking down her forehead. Without hesitation, he rushed to her side, ignoring the cries and gunfire behind him. He heaved the wreckage off her with a grunt, pulling her free just before a second explosion blasted overhead. "Can you walk?" he shouted, grabbing her hand. She nodded, dazed, and they stumbled into a side corridor. Alarms wailed. Soldiers stormed in from the entrance, their weapons drawn and aimed at everyone. One of them spotted Marcus and shouted in their native tongue. Ilaria stepped forward weakly, shielding him with her body and yelling something back, her voice echoing with command. The soldiers paused, but didn't lower their guns. "They think you're the one who attacked us," she whispered urgently. "You need to run." But Marcus shook his head. "I'm not leaving you." Sirens blared louder. Smoke rolled through the corridor, choking the air. Ilaria clutched his arm, her eyes wide, not just with fear, but with something deeper, some realization that everything they had hoped for had shattered in moments. "This wasn't supposed to happen," she said. "Someone wants us at war." He looked at her, then at the approaching soldiers, and made a decision. "Then we find out who." Together, the two darted into the darkness, disappearing into the bowels of the collapsing summit building as the world around them turned to fire and betrayal. And neither side knew yet that their most valuable leaders were no longer enemies, but fugitives bound by survival. Smoke still clung to the torn corridors of the summit building as Marcus and Ilaria ran through the shadows, chased by confusion, betrayal, and now their own people. Alarms rang behind them like distant cries for peace that had already died, and every step they took felt like a step into deeper danger. Yet neither slowed Marcus, the loyal human officer, and Ilaria, the alien princess whose very presence now marked him as a traitor. Outside, patrol ships zipped through the sky, scanning for survivors and suspects. And from a hidden hangar beneath the ruins, Marcus found what he was hoping for: a merchant shuttle. Small, old, but untouched. As they climbed aboard, Eladia hesitated for just a breath, staring back at the city that had tried to unite civilizations but now stood smoking and broken behind them. Then she stepped in, and Marcus sealed the hatch. The ship sputtered as it lifted into the dark sky, ducking past watchful drones before launching into the void to a galaxy that now saw them both as enemies. They drifted for hours in silence, surrounded by stars and uncertainty, until they reached the edge of the Belrath Rim, a lawless stretch of space where smugglers and outcasts found shelter. Marcus landed the shuttle on a mining colony carved into a dead asteroid, hoping for fuel and food, but also for quiet. At peace was not something fugitives could find easily. As they walked through the colony's narrow tunnels, passing shady traders and tired workers, Ilaria covered her royal markings and kept her voice low, while Marcus tried not to draw attention. But the air was thick with suspicion, and news of the summit attack had already spread. Pictures of Marcus and Ilaria were shown on public screens, marked as wanted by both the Earth Confederation and the Zarinthian Empire. Whispers followed them. Eyes lingered too long. That night, in a rented metal room, Ilaria sat by the narrow window, watching space while Marcus checked the old device they had stolen. Only static. No contact, no answers, only questions and fear. Suddenly, a soft knock on the door froze them both, and Marcus pulled his blaster quietly as he approached. He opened it fast, ready to shoot, but stopped when he saw the visitor, a small man with one robotic eye and a scar across his neck. He spoke fast, saying he knew who they were and that he didn't care. He hated both governments, said peace was never going to last because powerful people in both worlds wanted the war to continue, and he could help them disappear for a price. Ilaria didn't trust him, but they had no other choice, so they followed him into the deeper tunnels, where he introduced them to a rebel engineer named Sira, who had decrypted a message sent just minutes before the summit bombing, proof that a human general and a Zarinthian noble had planned together to reignite the war and profit from it. Marcus was stunned, and Ilaria's eyes filled with quiet rage, not just at the betrayal, but at how easily their lives were used like pieces on a board. They had to get this information to someone, but every major channel was now locked down or controlled, and the only way to expose the truth was to reach the old relay tower on a nearby moon, dead for years, but still able to broadcast across neutral space. They left the colony that night, but as their ship lifted off, a silent missile struck the rear wing. They spiraled, hit hard turbulence, and barely escaped the blast. Someone had tipped off a bounty hunter. A sleek fighter appeared behind them, its pilot broadcasting a message: "Surrender now, and I'll be gentle." Marcus swore under his breath and began evasive maneuvers through the asteroid field, while Ilaria rerouted power to the shields. The chase felt endless, the ship groaning under pressure, and the bounty hunter too skilled. Whoever he was, he had studied human combat patterns. Finally, Marcus recognized a maneuver, old trick only taught in Earth's Black Ops unit, and realized the pilot wasn't just any hunter. It was someone from his past. With one desperate turn, they led the hunter into a collapsing asteroid pocket and escaped as the field closed behind them. But their ship was nearly ruined, fuel leaking, and only hours remained before systems would fail. In the silence that followed, Ilaria finally spoke about how her mother would now see her as a traitor, about how she had believed in peace, in humans, in him, and how everything was now broken, even her future. Marcus looked at her and said softly that the future was not lost, not yet, and that maybe it was time for them to stop running and start fighting back. The stars moved slowly around them, and in that moment, even surrounded by ruin, Ilaria smiled faintly, not with hope, but with a spark of defiance. She was not just a princess anymore, and he was not just a soldier. They were fugitives. Yes, but they were also something more. The only two people in the galaxy who knew the truth, and who still believed that the war could be stopped, not with weapons, but with courage and the will to stand together. Even when their worlds had turned against them, the damaged shuttle limped through the blackness of space, sparks jumping from broken panels as Marcus tried to stabilize their course, and Ilaria sat near the shattered navigation screen, her eyes fixed on the data chip in her hand, the one that held everything: messages, codes, proof that someone high in both the Earth Confederation and the Zarinthian Empire had worked together to destroy the peace talks. The truth was there, waiting to be seen, but getting someone to believe it was the real battle. The old mining drone they had salvaged from the asteroid field barely kept them alive as they pushed toward the planet Geron, a neutral research world hidden by its thick storms, where a retired human intelligence officer named Captain Reese had gone dark years ago after a mission gone wrong. Marcus remembered Reese as someone who saw too much and trusted too few if anyone could help them spread the truth. It was him. The journey was slow and silent, every second stretched by the weight of betrayal. And when they finally entered Joran's atmosphere, the ship shook violently from the electric winds that cracked across the skies like angry veins of fire. They crash-landed in a swamp near an old observatory, the whole smoking and air filters failing. But they made it out, soaked and coughing, dragging their supplies toward a tower barely visible in the gray mist. Inside, Reese greeted them not with a smile, but a rifle, pointing it straight at Marcus's chest until Ilaria stepped forward and offered the chip without a word. Reese took it, scanned it, then swore quietly as the files revealed private transmissions, secret deals, and coordinated sabotage designed to keep the war going while the elites grew richer and civilians on both sides suffered. He lowered the rifle, eyes dark with anger, and said they had to act fast because once the war started again, there would be no stopping it. He explained that only one place could send a wide enough broadcast to expose the truth before both governments shut it down: Stratos Prime, a massive artificial world where neutral ambassadors met to pretend diplomacy still mattered. Ilaria hesitated. Stratos was where her cousin, Lord Theros, would be, the one who had always wanted her title, and who now likely viewed her as a traitor. Marcus offered to go alone, but she refused, standing taller than he'd ever seen her, and said this was her fight too. With Reese's help, they hacked a long-range transport drone and rewired its systems for stealth, then launched toward Stratos, hiding in the shadows of a passing cargo convoy to avoid patrols. During the trip, Marcus asked Ilaria about Theros, and she told him how he believed in domination. It's not peace, how he'd once said the Zarinthians were meant to rule, not share the stars. She feared he was behind more than just the summit attack, and Marcus knew then that this mission was more dangerous than they thought. When they reached Stratos Prime, they landed in an underbelly port, using stolen credentials to pass through scans. In the world above was nothing like the broken places they'd signed: clean skies, towering halls, and rich delegates speaking calmly while war brewed just beyond the stars. They dressed as traitors, blending into the crowd, but there every step was risky. Every glance could be a trap. And it didn't take long before Ilaria sensed someone following them, hidden thoughts brushing against her psionic senses like cold fingers. They reached the central tower, where the main broadcast system was located, but the halls were already crawling with guards, not from Stratos security, but from Zarinth Prime. Theros was here, and he had turned the summit into a trap. Reese sent a hidden transmission, setting off a power glitch to draw the guards away, giving Marcus and Ilaria 10 minutes to upload the data. As they entered the broadcast room, Ilaria froze. Theros stood at the far end, smiling with no warmth, flanked by armored soldiers. He called her a disgrace, a mistake of royal blood, and offered her one last chance to return and lie for the Empire, to tell the galaxy the humans had attacked first, to ignite the war fully, and let the Empire crush Earth once and for all. Ilaria stepped forward, voice clear, and told him she would never serve a throne built on lies. And Marcus raised his weapon, ready to fight, even as the odds turned against them. Then the lights flickered, and Reese's distraction worked just long enough for Ilaria to slam the chip into the broadcast console and start the upload. Taros lunged forward, shouting, but Marcus met him halfway, tackling him into a control panel while blaster fire lit up the room. Ilaria ducked behind the console, protecting the upload as bullets tore through the walls. Seconds felt like hours, and just as the soldiers advanced, a blinding pulse shook the room. Reese had overloaded the emergency failsafe, knocking out all non-essential systems and giving Ilaria the time she needed. The screen blinked green. The transmission was complete, and across the stars, the message spread. Video files, voice recordings, names, and evidence, played in public feeds on both Earth and Zerinth Prime, watched by billions who now saw the truth. The guards hesitated, confused by the images flashing on their wrist screens, and Theros, bleeding and furious, screamed that it was all fake, but no one moved to follow him. Marcus stood slowly, bruised but alive, and helped Ilaria to her feet. They didn't wait for thanks. They knew their presence was still dangerous, and with a nod from Reese, they fled into the crowd, vanishing before more soldiers arrived. On the upper platforms, news feeds buzzed, and panic spread among the elite as their secrets were exposed. While in the streets, people began to chant, not for war but for answers. Somewhere above, in the vast silence between stars, ships that had prepared for battle began to hesitate, unsure of their orders, and in the quiet that followed, Ilaria looked at Marcus and said softly, "We've made them see, ... but they won't forget what we did." He nodded, knowing it was only the beginning, and as they left Stratos behind, heading into the unknown, they carried more than just the weight of survival. They carried the spark of something stronger than fear, the first real hope that peace could be earned through truth, not silence. The stars above flickered like watchful eyes as Marcus and Ilaria moved silently through the dense forest of Narella, a hidden moon where a secret summit had been called by neutral leaders, shaken by the truth revealed from Stratos Prime. The transmission had gone further than they expected across colonies, warships, and even into the palaces of both the Earth Confederation and the Zerenthian Empire, spreading like wildfire and igniting doubt everywhere. But it also put a price on their heads higher than ever before. Now, both were seen as traitors and threats, and only a few brave leaders dared to listen. Hence the summit on Narella. Far from the politics of the core systems, deep inside an ancient fortress carved into the cliffs centuries ago by forgotten settlers. As they approached, the air felt heavy with tension. Guards from multiple species standing in silence, weapons ready, their faces unreadable. Marcus's hand stayed close to his blaster, and Ilaria moved with royal grace, hiding her fear beneath calm eyes. Inside the stone hall, small fires lit the wide chamber, and holograms of distant stars floated above the delegates' table, where only 6 leaders had come, 3 human, Zerenthian, and 1 from a neutral trader union, all unsure if peace was still possible. Marcus and Ilaria presented what they knew, not just the plot at the first summit, but how deep it ran: military contracts, false intelligence, and secret weapons testing, all meant to keep the war machine alive, no matter the cost. The delegates listened, some nodding, others cold, one even accusing them of spreading lies to weaken their own people. But Ilaria stood and removed the band from her wrist, the one that blocked her telepathic gift, and she reached out to let them see her truth, not through words, but through memories. She let them feel her fear in the ruins of the summit, her hope before it all burned, and the pain when her cousin Theros called her a traitor. It was risky, opening her mind like that, but it worked. Most of them saw the truth, and some even looked away in shame. Just as the last memory faded, the stone walls trembled, and the doors burst open with a flash of smoke, and still unknown attackers stormed in. Their armor marked with no symbols, their weapons built from human and Zorinthian tech. And in that moment, it was clear this summit had been found and betrayed, not from outside, but from within. One of the delegates had leaked their location, and chaos exploded as blaster fire echoed off the walls, and guards fell trying to protect the leaders. Marcus pulled Ilaria behind a pillar, returning fire while shouting to the others to take cover. Smoke made it hard to see, and shadowed shapes moved quickly, trained and deadly. Then Ilaria felt it, her cousin Theros nearby, his mind brushing hers like a blade. He was here. Not just to silence them, but to end this peace attempt forever. She ran toward the side corridor, heart pounding, and found him waiting, sword drawn, a wicked grin on his face. He told her she should have died on Tarsis 3, that their blood was meant to rule, not bow to fragile ideas like unity and peace, and that she had shamed their family for the last time. I fought her training against his rage, energy blades clashing in tight quarters, sparks flying in, though he was stronger. She was focused, calm, remembering Marcus's voice, the stars above, and what they were fighting for. She knocked his blade aside, but he struck her arm, and pain flared through her. Yet she didn't stop. In the final moment, he charged. She stepped aside, letting him fall into the exposed wiring behind her, where electricity surged and dropped him unconscious. Meanwhile, Marcus held the attackers back with 2 guards, but their line was breaking, and just as they ran out of ammo, the hidden systems Reese had planted kicked in. Defense turrets dropped from the ceiling, firing at the intruders and forcing them into retreat. The battle ended quickly after that, bodies scattered across the stone floor, smoke rising from broken weapons and silent walls. The summit was shattered again, but the delegates were alive, and now, more than ever, they saw the cost of truth, yet none of them turned away. Instead, they pledged to form a new alliance, a secret one for now, built not by orders from Earth or Zorinth Prime, but by those who had seen what lies did to both sides. Ilaria sat near a cracked wall, her arm bandaged, and Marcus sat beside her, tired but still alert. She looked at him and whispered, "They will come again," and he nodded, saying, "Then we'll be ready." But in his heart, he feared the next step, because surviving the shadows was one thing, but bringing the truth into the light would take more than courage. It would take sacrifice. And as the fires burned low and the leaders spoke in quiet voices about rebellion and unity, Marcus knew this was only the beginning of a longer war not between humans and Zorinthians, but between those who wanted peace and those who would kill to stop it. The silence of deep space wrapped around the stolen freighter like a heavy blanket as Marcus and Ilaria drifted near the dark edge of the Saran expanse, a lawless region where old ships went to die and lost voices vanished into the void. Their last hope of escape after the summit ambush had turned into another trap, and now they were hunted more fiercely than ever by both sides, by mercenaries, by shadow units loyal to no flag, only coin and silence. Their allies from the summit were forced into hiding, and the fragile peace efforts had been crushed once more beneath fear and betrayal. But Marcus and Ilaria could not stop now. The stolen chip from Theros' own files, pulled from his personal risk core during the fight, revealed something darker than either of them had imagined. A prison facility hidden beyond any charted system, known only by its code name Tahallo. It was not just a prison, but a place where the worst secrets were buried, where scientists tested weapons on live prisoners, where those who spoke too much were erased without trial, and where political dissidents vanished into black cells, never meant to open again. Elijah had seen glimpses of it in her psychic flashes: pain, cold walls, steel voices. Hand now, the data proved her fears. Worse, Marcus saw a name he never thought he would see again: Commander Elon Core. His former mentor and the man he once trusted more than anyone, now listed as the overseer of the Hollow. They knew what they had to do. They could get in, expose what was happening there, would finally break the chains of lies holding the galaxy in war. But getting in meant surrendering, getting caught, and risking everything. With no other path left, they sent out a fake distress signal near the expanse, using an old Earth Navy encryption Marcus knew would reach the right ears, and they waited. Within hours, a patrol ship arrived, weapons locked, and a voice came through the calm, cold, familiar. It was Core himself. Marcus answered with only 2 words: "We surrender." And before Illyria could speak, they powered down the freighter, letting themselves be pulled into the patrol ship's hold. Cuffs snapped around their wrists, and dark hoods dropped over their heads, then silence long and hollow. When the hoods came off, they were no longer in the patrol ship, but deep inside the Hollow, stripped of weapons, names, even sound. Each cell separated by energy walls, each second filled with an emptiness that chewed at the mind. Marcus was taken first, led through metal halls to a chamber where Core stood in a black uniform, older now, eyes like chipped ice. He spoke slowly, telling Marcus that peace was a dream for children, that war was control, and control was order, and without it, chaos would rule the stars. He offered Marcus a chance to live, to return, to lead again, but Marcus stayed silent, his heart cold with disgust. Core smiled faintly and nodded, then turned away, ordering the guards to take Marcus to Cell 0, the place no one returned from. Meanwhile, Ilaria fought her own battle in a separate cell lined with psychic blockers, her powers numb, her memories forced to replay over and over by a cruel mind-tech device that made her relive the summit's destruction again and again. She tried to focus, to reach out mentally, but it was like screaming underwater, until one night, a faint flicker of thought touched her own, a voice like wind, whispering, "You are not alone." It was not Marcus, but someone else, a prisoner, long hidden in the depths of the Hollow. His mind had survived years of silence and pain, and who now helped guide her past the blocks. Ilaria followed that voice, step by step, memory by memory, learning to bend the shield slightly, enough to send a single signal back. Marcus heard it in his sleep. A dream that wasn't his, and he woke with fire in his chest, with nothing but walls around him. Marcus used what little he had: his soldier senses, his timing, his ability to notice cracks, even in perfect systems, and, after days of careful watching, he began his escape. Using loose bolts in blind corners, knocking out a guard with a single, silent strike, he made his way to the control center, guided by Ilaria's flickering thoughts, stealing access from a sleeping text console. And there he saw it all: rows of cells, tortured minds, names of leaders marked for death. And above all, a schedule. The Hollow was about to be erased, every prisoner silenced, every record deleted, all in the next 30 hours. Panic hit him like fire, but he steadied himself and moved fast, triggering a silent override to Ilarisa's cell and slipping inside just as guards noticed the breach. The two embraced only for a second, no time for words, then ran through the crumbling levels, alarms now wailing as red lights painted the halls in warning. They reached the main terminal, and Marcus began the data transfer, while Ilaria shielded the door with whatever psychic energy she could recover. Barely enough, but it held. Through smoke and sirens, they heard Core's voice again, this time calm and cruel, promising to erase them both personally, and soon he appeared at the end of the corridor, flanked by soldiers. But then, something changed. Cells began opening, all around the hollow. Not by accident, but by a purpose. The prisoner who had reached Elijah had spread her signal to others. And now hundreds of minds, long silenced, joined together, rising not in chaos, but in defiance. Guards faltered, overwhelmed by the sudden wave of freed prisoners. And in the confusion, Marcus and Ilaria launched a broadcast from the hollow's central tower, sending every file, every record, every scream into the systems of Earth, Zarenth, Prime, and beyond. Kor reached them at last, weapon drawn, face twisted with fury, and shouted that they had doomed the galaxy. But Marcus stepped forward and said, "No," gave it a chance, then fired a single shot, not to kill, but to destroy the control panel behind Kor, sending the tower into a shutdown and trapping Kor beneath falling beams. As the platform collapsed, alarms rose to a scream, and Ilaria pulled Marcus to the edge where an escape pod waited, small, weak, but enough. They jumped, launched, and watched as the hollow burned from within, its evil finally exposed to light. As the pod drifted into the dark, they held each other, wounded, exhausted, but alive, and in the distance, emergency beacons began to blink, not from enemies, but from allies who had seen the truth and now came not with weapons, but with hope. In the silence of the stars, Ilaria whispered, "This is not the end." And Marcus, holding her hand, nodded and replied, "No, it's the beginning of something real." The escape pod drifted silently through the outer rim of the Varix belt. Its weak signal finally picked up by a neutral rescue vessel called the Starwind, which had been scanning for survivors from a recent skirmish between border patrols. The ship's crew was wary at first, unsure who or what they had found. But when the doors opened and Ilaria stepped out, her royal markings barely visible under bruises and grime, followed by Marcus with one arm still wrapped in a torn sling, and eyes sharp with purpose, they understood this was no ordinary rescue. These were the fugitives who had shattered the lies of two great empires and exposed the hollow to the galaxy. News of the prison's horrors had spread like lightning in a storm, shaking foundations on Earth and Zarenth Prime, with protests erupting, commanders arrested, and old alliances questioned. But not everyone welcomed the truth. Some still held power through fear and silence, and those people now marked Marcus and Ilaria not just as traitors, but as the greatest threat to their control. On board the Starwind, the couple was hidden and given basic medical care, but safety was short-lived. Within hours, enemy patrols began to sweep the sector, and it became clear they were being tracked by something more than scanners. The crew, a quiet engineer named Tal, confessed he had once worked under Commander Kor and had implanted a tracer in Marcus's old naval ID chip, still embedded deep in his shoulder after an old injury. With no time to surgically remove it, Marcus made the call to eject himself in a decoy pod, drawing the hunters away. But Ilaria refused to leave his side again. Instead, she turned to the psychic network she had awakened in the hollow. The minds she had touched were still alive, spread across systems, and now willing to help. Using a secure channel through the Starwind's core, she reached them. And soon, a plan formed. The last remaining leaders who had believed in the original summit's peace would meet again, this time in orbit above Zarenthus, where a final declaration could be made, not of surrender, but of unity, born from exposed truth and shared scars. As Marcus had the tracker deactivated through a dangerous energy pulse that nearly killed him, Ilaria prepared to face her people once more, not as a runaway princess, but as a voice for a future they had nearly lost. When they finally reached the edge of Zarenthus space, they were met by dozens of small craftsnot fighters, guided by civilian ships, traders, miners, medics, all flying in silent support. A shield around the Starwind as they entered orbit in the Grand Assembly Tower, once used for royal addresses and now sealed under emergency lockdown. Ilaria and Marcus stood before a massive screen that broadcast their faces to billions across Earth, across Zarenth Prime, in every neutral colony between. Elijah spoke first. Her voice cleared despite the crackle of static, and told the story, not just of the Hollow or the Summit, but of love born in the fire of war, of a bond that defied orders and bloodlines, and how she had seen the soul of a human, not as an enemy, but as someone who believed in something greater than survival hope. Then Marcus spoke, firm and unflinching, confessing that he had once followed orders without question, that he had pulled triggers in battles he never understood, but now he knew the truth. Peace was not weakness, and love was not betrayal. It was strength, the kind that fear could never kill. Many leaders remained silent, watching with guarded eyes, but one by one, some began to nod. The others stepped forward, pledging support, not just in words, but in action. Orders to disarm black sites, calls to investigate war profiteers in open, letters to the people calling for peace councils. Just as hope seemed to rise, a sharp warning came through the secure Chanela rogue fleet, made up of mercenaries and loyalist warships, was approaching fast, not to talk, but to erase everything and everyone tied to this rebellion. There was no time to flee, no ships fast enough to escape, so Marcus made a final choice. He would lead a defensive line using the Starwind and volunteer pilots from the civilian crafts, not to fight, but to hold the line long enough for the broadcast to finish and be recorded across the galaxy. Elia tried to stop him, but he only smiled and said, "You showed them the truth. Let me protect it," and kissed her gently before heading to the docking bay. The battle above Zorinthus was short, and fierce flashes of light streaked across the stars as the rogue fleet opened fire. But the civilian shield held longer than anyone expected, pilots giving all they had to defend the message of peace. Inside the Starwind, Marcus took direct control of the turret system, using every trick he had learned as a soldier to keep enemy fire away from the main tower. Ships exploded, flames danced in the void, and then silence. Reinforcements from neutral zones arrived just in time, forcing the attackers to retreat, but not before heavy damage was done. The Starwind was hit badly, and for a moment it drifted with no sign of Marcus's aboard. Ilaria, back in the tower, fell to her knees, heart frozen with fear, until a faint signal came through a barely working escape pod, tumbling toward the surface with Marcus inside, unconscious but alive. Days later, he woke in a medical chamber, blurry-eyed, and found Ilaria beside him, her hand in his, tears on her face, and the stars shining outside the window. The war was not over, not yet, but something had changed. Leaders were speaking. Armies were pausing, and people everywhere were asking the question: if a Zorinthian princess and a human soldier could find love in the fire of war, can't their worlds do the same? Ilaria leaned close, whispering the words she had never spoken until now. "I wish we could marry, human." And Marcus smiled, replying, "We will. Someday, when peace is more than just a dream." And outside, above the reborn city of Zorinthus, the sky was clear, the stars watching, and for the first time in a long, long while, the galaxy held its breath, not in fear, but in hope.